What comes to your mind when you think of homeless youth?
I can confidently say that within the period of my career, one of the greatest challenges is to work to overcome myths associated with youth homelessness.
What are some of the myths about youth experiencing homelessness?
Youth homelessness? We don't have a problem with that in Waterloo Region.
So just how prevalent is the issue of youth homelessness here in the Waterloo region?
Youth homelessness in Waterloo Region is a serious issue. While the exact number of youth experiencing homelessness in Waterloo Region is unknown, as many will stay with friends, relatives, in abandoned buildings, cars, or outdoors. As such, they are hidden and cannot be accurately captured. Data from emergency shelters is typically used to determine the prevalence rate of youth experiencing homelessness. In 2010, over 800 unaccompanied youth between the ages of 12 and 25 years stayed in emergency shelters across Waterloo Region. That would be enough youth to fill about 4 average-sized movie theaters. There are many reasons why youth leave home. The most common reasons are unresolved family conflict and abuse, including sexual and physical abuse, or neglect in the home. In addition to family problems, there are other factors that put youth at a higher risk of homelessness. Prevention strategies to keep youth in the home are favorable. However, there are instances where family-focused intervention would not be in the best interest of youth, and family reunification is not recommended. Research has shown that for youth who are not able to return home, early intervention is critical. If youth are not reached within 24 hours to 2 weeks of leaving home, they become entrenched in street culture. In 2010, 1,400 youth accessed street outreach services in Waterloo Region. There are 7 agencies in the region that provide services and housing options specifically for youth at risk of or experiencing homelessness.
Youth experiencing homelessness are criminal delinquents.
So what would you do if for some unforeseen reason you found yourself without housing? Imagine this coupled with being a youth. How would you feel? Inadequate? In some way responsible? Unworthy? Or even criminal?
In my experience as a police officer, both as a patrol officer and as a community resource officer within Cambridge, to paint all youth who are homeless as criminals is just not true. Our aim as a police service is to develop collaborative working partnerships with other agencies and to encourage family and youth to make positive and healthy choices.
Homeless youth will never aspire to be anything.
Well, I grew up in Toronto, and I remember very vividly some of my experiences. I was in foster care for a number of years as a child, and it was both good and bad in terms of some of the environments. We're going back to the 50s, of course, and I found that at that time I had some very loving families, and I had some other difficult families also, but it certainly was a time period for me which was challenging, and I think made me feel very vulnerable at the time. I was always very interested in politics and, you know, in terms of why I'm here today, I suppose. And that goes back to as a youth, and which is kind of surprising. I actually, as a youth, would get the Toronto Daily Star and read the paper every day, read the editorials, not the cartoons, editorials and things like that, the information that was going on. And I was always interested in politics, followed Toronto politics, federal and provincial, for quite a long time, and ended up here in Cambridge and eventually got involved in the political scene here. I think as a youth, you know, I used to dream about a lot of things, certainly in terms of wanting to be successful in life, which I think a lot of people do in terms of when they're young, to have good relationships with people, to have a family life, which is something I really didn't experience very much of at the time. And so, of course, that's, for me, were everyday, down-to-earth, sort of common things that were important to me, and things that actually, in the end, in terms of my relationship with my loving wife, brought me to, I think, a higher level and of achievement and support. I think there's always a lot of myths out there about people who are in situations, young people especially, in terms of being in foster care, whatever it may be that we term it today. What people need, young people need, is they need to be cared about, they need to be supported, they need to be made to realize that they're as important and they can be as successful as anybody else. And with that kind of environment, that caring environment, not just within the whole home they're living in, the group home or whatever it may be, but within the community in general, these things will help support that individual to become successful and to become an integral and positive part of the community.
Youth who are without homes are not interested in education.
My name is Tina. I arrived at Argus Residence for Youth, the girls' home, in May of 2005. I had become homeless. I had completed high school, moved out to Kitchener to attend a local college, and registered into the Law and Security Police Foundation's diploma course. My first year went terrible. In April of 2005, I became homeless. While living at Argus, I managed to attend all my classes and received an entrance into the new semester at the college. I obtained work and eventually found my own place to call home. As to this day, I have graduated from the Law and Security Administration, have worked, and now have a 2.5-year-old son, who I will get the chance to teach him that perseverance is a great quality to have and to never give up on your dreams.
It's really hard as a homeless youth to focus on school, as a place to live becomes a huge priority. Well, I found a huge improvement in my grades at school after I had access to Argus, because I had a lot of time to really focus on my schoolwork. I've been getting over 90% now, easily, in a lot of my classes. Whereas before I had access to Argus, I was doing not that well. I feel in Waterloo Region there is quite a lack of affordable housing for youth. I find it really hard to find a good affordable place, and a lot of landlords are, for regular marketplaces, they're very strict, and I find sometimes they give you a certain stereotype just because I'm coming out of a shelter, and I've been actually denied quite a few apartments because of where I'm coming from.
Youth who experience homelessness are lazy. They do not want to work.
When I was 16, I had to leave my house, and unfortunately at that time I was homeless, and I still wanted to be in school, still wanted to maintain my high school education, so I have felt the need to access social services at that time through Argus Housing. Argus gave me the foundation I needed to seek employment and to actually have an income in order to live by myself. And once I found employment, I managed to maintain employment in that same field to currently today. Well, I'm lucky to be blessed with a big family. I live with 4 children, and I just got a baby who's 6 months old. She is the cutest thing in the world, and I love them all very dearly.
Homeless youth just cannot follow the rules.
I'm often asked the question by curious family and friends, what are the youth like that you work with in the shelter? I can tell you that these youth are just like any other teenagers. They have goals and aspirations, they have their own ideas and opinions. But I think what sets them apart from other youth is that they have experienced a lack of support, often abuse, rejection, and abandonment. For example, in the last 2 years, 70% of the youth accessing emergency shelter at Argus identified physical, sexual, or emotional abuse as a part of their earlier life experience. 25% left their family home for the first time between the ages of 12 and 15, with an additional 5% while under the age of 12. Yet, despite these challenges, the majority of young people we serve are achieving for themselves on a significant level. For example, with the same time period, 94% of youth develop productive activity plans for themselves relating to school, employment, or their health. And nearly 85% of youth set goals for themselves and achieved them. Given the demonstrated ability for these youth to overcome obstacles, I would have to argue that these are exceptional people. They still need the guidance and support from people in their community, but they can be successful, and we have witnessed this over and over again.
What we think of youth experiencing homelessness doesn't matter.
As the Integrating Community Youth Coordinator at Argus Residence for Young People, one of my responsibilities is to work in conjunction with local law enforcement and community partners to reduce and prevent bias-based or hate crimes against youth who experience homelessness. Hate crimes are crimes which are perpetrated against an individual based on bias, prejudice, and discrimination. Recent reports have shown that there is a rise in the number of hate crimes committed against those who lack adequate housing here in Canada and abroad, as those without shelter are invariably more vulnerable than those who are housed. This bias and hatred is rooted in the perception and myths that youths who experience homelessness are somehow different or other. This could not be further from the truth. I have found that these myths and ill-deeded misconceptions only lend to the stigmas that these young people live with and unfortunately accept for themselves, creating a greater cycle of hate, insecurity, inadequacy, and low self-esteem. Many victims without housing fail to report crimes due to the stigmas and self-adapted feelings of inadequacy and shame. By dispelling these myths about youth who experience homelessness, we not only educate and enlighten ourselves and our neighbors and our community, we also help to reduce stigmas experienced by these youth as we aim to reduce and prevent bias-based or hate crimes against these young and vulnerable individuals. To this end, I very much hope that this video enlightens, informs, educates, and invokes thought in our efforts to help foster and promote a safe, vital, healthy, and inclusive community.